45 people. We have only 39, so maybe a few more minutes. Sorry about that. Yeah, somebody else is asking to join in. Hopefully you shouldn't be able to hear the rain. If it gets too loud, I will put on headphones and a headphone mic so that it covers the noise of the rain. So this is the first for the London Stereoscopic Company. We've never organized a Zoom meeting before, so there is a first time for everything. So it's a great day because we are going virtual and we are adapting to the circumstances. I mean, we are living in strange times, and so we have to make do and make the most of something bad. Okay, I think we can start, and I will let people in if I can during the talk. I'm not sure I can, but okay. So, as you know, we are here to talk about Florence Nightingale. So I will let you concentrate on the pictures because it's all about the pictures, and I will start sharing my screen. So, yeah, there we go. There we are. See my screen on showing this pose. Okay. Okay, you share. Okay. Right, so it begins very well. Right, there we go. I am screen sharing. Right. So as it says on the slide here, my name is Denis. I'm a photo historian. I am curator of Dr. May's collection of Victorian photographs, and I'm also part of the London Stereoscopic Company, Dr. May's London Stereoscopic Company. And today we are giving a talk in aid of the Florence Nightingale Museum. So we are going to talk about that lady, Florence Nightingale. We are celebrating a remarkable woman today. And as you may know, 2020 is the year of her bicentenary. Unfortunately, a lot of events had to be cancelled. She was born on the 12th of May, 1820, so 200 years ago. And because of the coronavirus, a lot of things had to be cancelled. The talk I'm giving today, I should have given at the National Portrait Gallery in 3D in May. But as you know, everything was closed, and because of the virus, we were in lockdown. So that's why you are having the talk now, which is also an anniversary, which I will mention in a few minutes. So Florence Nightingale, even though we've had lockdown and lots of things were cancelled, she's still celebrated. Her bicentenary is still celebrated through stamps, for example, here. Italian stamps celebrating the life of this woman, and ever since the outcome of the beginning of stamps, actually, she has been celebrated through first letter envelopes, like here, the 150th anniversary. So Heroes of Medicine, she's part of the Heroes of Medicine. These are much older stamps, one from Belgium, one from the UK, Florence Nightingale in 1916. This one on the left is from Germany, and you have another one in Uganda, from Africa in Uganda, for this one from 2000. So She's been celebrated a lot, especially through stamps and lots of events. And we are giving this talk for the Florence Nightingale Museum, which is, I think, has reopened now. So if you are in London, you can go there. And as you know, during the lockdown, there was a temporary hospital in London which was named after Florence Nightingale. So she's not forgotten. People remember her, remember what she did. She's called the mother of nursing, and I think she deserved that name, as we'll see. So this one is from Australia. Another one, a tradition of service. So these are quite old stamps now, but they are very easy to find. So if you want to specialize in stamps about Florence Nightingale, just go ahead. There are lots of them. Now, if you were, okay, so why is it stuck? My video is stuck. Interesting. Yeah, I'll stop the share and I'll start again if you don't mind, because I've got a problem here. I can't do anything. Do anything.
Denis さんがすげえ緊張してる。
If you were in Britain between 1975 and 1990, okay?
Nightingale.
In 1994, you may actually have carried a portrait of Florence Nightingale in your pocket because she featured on the £10 note. Now, even though she was born 200 years ago and lots of books and articles have been written about her, there are still lots of mysteries surrounding Florence Nightingale. I've chosen 3 just to illustrate. The first one is the mystery of Asian origins. I assure you that I didn't tamper with the picture on the right. I bought that postcard on the internet, and that's a mystery to me, which is to be solved. Another mystery is her involvement in a video game called Assassin's Creed Syndicate. This is a strange one. And a third one is the presence of a face on a cigar ring. So the question is, was Florence Nightingale a cigar smoker like Sir Winston Churchill? I don't know. And we'll leave those mysteries to be solved by somebody else, because today we are going to concentrate on the mysteries behind her iconic images, photographs. Now, this is a quest which took me and my assistant Rebecca to many places, starting with the Florence Nightingale Museum in London, the National Army Museum, the National Archives at Kew Gardens, the London Metropolitan Archives, the Women's Library at the School of Economics in London as well, the National Portrait Gallery, of course, and last but not least, Claydon House, the house where her sister and her sister's husband lived. So it was a quest, it was a remarkable journey, and we really enjoyed every minute of it. Now, our story starts 110 years ago to the very day when Florence Nightingale died. She died on the 13th of August, 1910, and as you can see, she was mentioned in the press a lot at the time, and she was still called the heroine of the Crimean War, life devoted to the relief of suffering. So lots of big titles when she died. 7 days later, on the 20th, Florence Nightingale was buried in the village of East Wellow in Hampshire, because she had a house there, Embley Park. her parents had a house there that was one of her two residences. And this is a picture from the funeral of Florence Nightingale back in 1910, the burial of the lady with a lamp, from an old magazine. And as you can see in the photo on the right, the man in the middle here looked after in Scutari near Constantinople. It's in French, but it says, at the funeral of Miss Nightingale, in the middle, a veteran she looked after. So she's buried in the churchyard of the Church of St. Margaret of Antioch in East Wello. And this is, you can see a monument on the right. This is where she's buried with some other members of the family. So this is the church, the little church. It's a very, very small church and churchyard, but it's a very pleasant spot, British spot, and it's worth it. Wherever you want. So there's some pictures of the grave. You can see on the screen in the center here, FN, just her initials, not even the whole name. Her father is buried there as well. So you can see FN here, born 12th of May 1820, died 13th of August 1910. So let's go back in time. This is a time machine. So let's go back further in time, this time to Florence, Italy, on the 12th of May 1820, 200 years ago, over 200 years ago. This is where she was born, and this is why she was called Florence, because she was born in Florence, Italy. Her sister, elder sister, Parthenope, was called Parthenope because she was born in Naples, also in Italy, and Parthenope was the old Greek name of the city. So Florence Nightingale grew up in a wealthy family, and here she is around 1836, a painting by William White. She could have been just like a lot of other aristocratic ladies, just enjoy embroidering, playing the piano, singing, dancing, but she had something else in mind, and she wanted to train as a nurse. Now this was considered very eccentric in Victorian Britain, and so she went to Germany to learn about nursing, and she came back to England, and later on she became the superintendent of a gentle women's hospital in Harley Street, and this is where her story really begins. It begins on the 21st of October 1854, when she left that hospital, which no longer exists. There is just that inscription on the wall where the building used to stand. She left for the Crimea with about 38 other nurses. And why did she go? Because the conditions there were appalling. People were complaining that the soldiers were dying. Too many soldiers were dying. So she was sent there to try and improve nursing in the Crimea. And she managed to go because of a friend, Sir Sidney Herbert. Here you can see in a photograph by Denis, shortly before he died. He died in 1861, but he was a staunch supporter of what she did, and she managed to go to the Crimea thanks to him. Now, when she left, nobody knew who Miss Nightingale was, and the question was, in everybody's mind, was, who is Mrs. Nightingale? They didn't even know she was a miss. So this is what you see in the article here. Many ask this question. It has not yet been adequately answered. We reply then, Mrs. Nightingale is Miss Nightingale, or rather, Miss Florence Nightingale. So she was totally unknown when she left. Even Queen Victoria had to ask who she was before she authorized going there. And The other question that people wanted to have answered immediately was, what does she look like? What is she like? What sort of person is this young woman going to the Crimea with other nurses? And they wanted a description. So this is one of the earliest description I could find. And as you can see, it's not really very precise. So she's like any other well-bred woman over 30 years of life. The countenance, and so they mention the countenance, and it says she doesn't possess a positive beauty, but it is a face not easily forgotten. But when you read that description, it's actually quite difficult to imagine what she really looked like. There were other descriptions published, but much later. Here is another one. This is probably the best one, the best written description of her. But as you can see, it was published in October 1857 in a book by Alexis Soyer. He went there. He was a French cook, and he went there to try and improve the meals at Scutari Hospital. So he says she's rather high in stature, fair in complexion, and slim in person. Her hair is brown and is worn quite plain. So we have a better description here, but still we don't know exactly what it looks like. I wish I could tell you, well, this is a photo of Miss Nightingale looking after the wounded soldiers in Scutari Hospital, but it's not. This is a much later photo. This was taken during the First World War, and it's probably staged, but it's still a nice image of soldiers being looked after by a nurse. I wish we had a photo of the Florence Nightingale like this one, but we don't. The best we can find is something like this. This is borrowed from, this is an engraving from a book which was published after the Crimean War, War with Russia, I think it's called, and it's one of the few pictures showing her tending the wounded. So no real image of Florence Nightingale, but people wanted to know what she really looked like. So this is the first, one of the first portraits that was published by Paul and Domenico Naghi in 1854, the 20th of November. So she had been gone for about 2 months, and over a month, sorry. And this is the first portrait that was published. People wanted to buy the portrait. The other two here, the first one on the left, also by Paul and Domenico Naghi, 20th of November 1854, from a drawing by a cousin, Hilary Bonham Carter, and the one on the right by an anonymous artist, which was published on the 16th of December 1854. But it's quite vague. I mean, you can't, if you met Florence Nightingale in the street, you couldn't really recognize her from those portraits. Here is another one, the same one as we've seen before, but the other way around, reversed. January 1855 in the English Women's Domestic Magazine. Castles Illustrated, 10th of February 1855. Again, she looks like anybody else. She could be anybody, any young woman. So they are not very precise description or portraits of her. Now, things start to change for her. She becomes really famous thanks to that article published in the Times on the 5th of February 1855, written by John MacDonald, who was a correspondent to the Crimea. And this is where the legend begins. She is a ministering angel, he writes, and he describes a slender form gliding quietly along each corridor. And, of course, this image, which became the sort of signature for Florence Nightingale, alone with a little lamp in her hand, making a solitary round. So the legend of the lady with a lamp was born on that very day, the 5th of February 1855, in the Times. And a few days later, the Illustrated London News published an engraving showing Florence Nightingale making a solitary round and carrying her little lamp. Now, the engraver, the anonymous engraver, had never met Florence Nightingale probably, so he was just trying to make an illustration from what he had read in the Times. And unknowingly, he started a sort of a legend and also a myth, the myth of the lady with the lamp. But he chose the wrong lamp. If you look at the picture, so the picture on the left is an enlargement of the engraving from the Times, and most of other representations of Florence Nightingale show her with a genie lamp, also called an oil Greek lamp. But as we know, this is not exactly what happened. So this is a later illustration here in color. She's still holding a Greek lamp, a genie lamp, just like Aladdin. And if you blow up the 10-pound note, you can also see the same lamp here, a lady with a lamp. So this is how the legend was born. But we know, and if you visit the Florence Nightingale Museum, you will see that this is not the right lamp. This is a more recent image of Florence Nightingale, and again the same kind of lamp. Now, it's very strange actually they chose the genie lamp, because if you blow up the engraving published in the Illustrated London News in 1855, this is not a genie lamp. This is a burner, an oil burner, very similar to the one you see on the right in this photograph by Thomas Richard Williams. So this was not even a genie lamp, but for some reason in the public mind it became a genie lamp. Now, this is not Florence Nightingale. This is a portrait from the National Portrait Gallery, and this is Anna Nigel. She was an actress, 1904-1986. So why is she here? Because she portrayed Florence Nightingale in 1951, and as you can see here, the man next to her is holding the right kind of lamp, and she is holding the right kind of lamp in the poster too. And this lamp you can see if you visit the National Army Museum, and there are modern copies of that lamp in the Florence Nightingale Museum as well. So this is the lamp she should have been presented with. But enough with the lamp. Let's go back to the portraits of Florence Nightingale. So we are in 1856. She has been in the Crimea since December 1854, so nearly over a year and a couple of months now, and still no portraits of her. So these are two pages from a newspaper, Illustrated Times and Illustrierte Zeitung, are dated from February 1856, and they show Florence Nightingale, an engraving made after a drawing, and the drawing was made by her own sister Parthenope, and it shows her with a tiny little owl. And now this owl was real. It was a pet owl Florence had picked up in Athens when she was visiting the Parthenon, and the owl had dropped from its nest apparently, and Florence picked it up and kept it as a pet. And it is said that she died, the owl died the day Florence left for the Crimea, but Florence had her taxidermied, and if you visit the Florence Nightingale Museum, you can see this is Florence Nightingale's pet owl, Athena. Apparently it didn't have a very good temper, but it was a very tiny bird, but it was still a pet. Now, this is another portrait of Florence Nightingale from the cover of a score, a song, the Nightingale Song to the Sick and Wounded, again in 1856. And this is an enlargement, and again you can see, difficult to recognize her if you met her in the street. This is another one, a portrait of Miss Nightingale from May 1856 this time. And this one was used over and over again in a song. The soldiers, I can't read the title. The Soldier's Friend, yeah, sorry. Got it on my screen. Now, 16th of August 1856, Florence is back home. and this is reported in lots of newspapers and here in the Illustrated London News. She's back home, and we still don't know what she looks like. And she came back home in a sort of a incognito way. She didn't want to be met by people because she knew she would be celebrated as a hero, like a hero. And so she made her way back to France, to Britain via France. She took a cargo boat and she sailed to France, and then she crossed France by rail, and she crossed the Channel by ferry boat, and she was traveling under the name of Smith. She was traveling with her aunt, and she was traveling incognito under the name of Smith. And she arrived at her home in Derbyshire, Lea Hurst.
H が発音できんだ、デニスさんって。
Until after the fact, and so she wanted to avoid the crowd, and so nobody still knew what she was like and what she looked like. A few days after she arrived in Britain, something else came back from the Crimea, and this was this carriage here, which was illustrated, engraved as a woodcut in the Illustrated London News for the 30th of August 1856. Miss Nightingale's carriage at the seat of war. See next page. So, since there was no Miss Nightingale to celebrate, well, people actually got very interested in the carriage itself, because it had been her carriage. She had used it in the Crimea to go and get some wounded soldiers and bring them back to the hospital. And this is what you can read in the Brighton Gazette on the 21st of August 1856. Miss Nightingale's carriage brought from the Crimea, and the Argo steamer has arrived at the mayor of Southampton's manufactory. It excited a good deal of interest. So the carriage became a sort of a replacement for Miss Nightingale, and people started wanting to see the carriage, touch the carriage. It became a sort of iconic object as well. It was photographed, and this is a postcard from the 1910s. And as you can see, this is an article from 1913 describing the hooded baggage wagon without springs, which was given to a Florence Nightingale. So it became a sort of an icon as well, this carriage, because Miss Nightingale didn't want to show her face. The carriage was damaged during the Second World War. Sorry, a bomb fell where it was and damaged the carriage. And as you can see here from an article from December 1940, badly damaged in an air raid, but fortunately Mr. Welland decided to restore it to its former glory. And 1942, the carriage is being restored, and it's been paid for. Somebody paid for the restoration. And here it is in 1954, when they celebrated the centenary of Florence leaving for the Crimea. It was used in the White City tattoo, and it's the last time it was actually used in a public event as a carriage. So it became really an icon, and people loved that carriage. And it was given to the St. Thomas's Hospital, and where the Florence Nightingale Museum is. And of course, because of lack of space, the museum had to give it to Claydon House, where it is now. So this is another photo showing nurses reenacting the Crimean War, the use of the carriage as an ambulance. So if you go to Claydon House, this is what the carriage looks like. So it's been preserved, it's been restored. It's no longer used as a carriage because it's a bit old now and a bit fragile, but you can still see what it must have been like to travel in that contraption. This is a close-up here, wicker, so you can see the sides are made of wicker work. And if you look inside, so inside it looks like a sort of big bathtub, so that the soldiers could actually be lying in the carriage, and the driver, the coachman, did not disturb them, and the nurse could sit next to the wounded person. And this is what Florence Nightingale did. So a very important icon, the carriage. But another one, again, since Miss Nightingale remained mysteriously absent and didn't want to show her face, people started to get interested in her house as well, in Embley House here, the home of Miss Nightingale. So this one is in Hampshire. And the other one, Lea Hurst in Derbyshire, the home of Florence Nightingale. This is a half stereo. And here is another one without the label. So this is the house and this is the balcony where a bedroom was. So the house became another icon because, again, she didn't want to be seen. This is a later magic lantern slide by George Washington Wilson, again showing the house. This one has been tinted. These are not natural colors. The slide was painted over. And of course, what? Still no portraits of Miss Nightingale. We are in 1856 and there are still no portraits of Miss Nightingale nearly a year and a half after she left for the Crimea. Fortunately, things were going to change thanks to this man, Thomas Agnew, an art dealer, and to this other person, Jerry Barrett, a painter. So these two men, Thomas Agnew commissioned Jerry Barrett to paint a scene featuring Florence Nightingale, and he sent him to the Crimea, to Scutari, to Constantinople, to meet Florence Nightingale and ask her to sit for him. So this is what Jerry Barrett did, but Miss Nightingale refused to sit for him. She didn't have time for such nonsense, and so Jerry Barrett had to sketch very fast drawings where whenever he could catch a glimpse of her. They had some stormy interviews when she refused to sit for him. So he drew this sketch here, and he managed to draw the one on the left in June 1856. He met her briefly, so briefly, and he drew that sketch. And on the day she left the Crimea, on the 27th of July 1856, he just managed to catch her again, catch a few sketches of her leaving the Crimea, and that's it. So this is the sketch for the painting Barrett was working on. This one he had with him in the Crimea, and he showed it to Florence Nightingale. It's a very important sketch, oil sketch. It is at the National Portrait Gallery next to the original painting. And this is the painting, this is a detail, of the sketch. So look at it carefully because this is very important. Look how she looks. This is Florence Nightingale as seen by Jerry Barrett in 1856 before she left for the Crimea. Now this is an engraving after the finished painting. The finished painting had a very short shelf life, if you want, because it was exhibited for the first time in 1857, and then it was bought by a private collector in 1859 and disappeared until 1993. So very few people actually saw the original painting, but they knew it from the engravings that were made from it. So this is the final painting, and this is the original painting, now at the National Portrait Gallery too, and this is what she looks like in the final painting. This is the sketch, and as you can see, it looks very similar to the sketch he did of her in June 56. And this is the final portrait. And the final painting was shown in June 1857. 1857, she had been back to Britain for about a year, and this is the first portrait people could see of her, but just for a very limited time. Now, this is another one, another portrait of Florence Nightingale. Miss Florence Nightingale at Embley, December the 28th, 1857. And this is by George Scharf, an art critic and illustrator. Now, if you look at the drawing here, and if you look at the painting again, you may notice that she's wearing the same kind of a collar, the same ribbon around the neck, the same bonnet, the same dress, exactly the same. So where did that come from? Why did Mr. Barrett and Mr. Scharf managed to paint to represent Florence Nightingale wearing that dress? Well, the answer is this. The first photograph of Florence Nightingale was made, appeared at that time. This is not how it was shown at the beginning. We don't actually know how it was shown. But we know that the first photograph of her back from the Crimea was made sometime between November 1856 and June 1857. Why November 1856? Because we know that she came back from the Crimea in August. She spent some time at Lea Hurst to rest. Then she went to see the Queen Victoria. She met Queen Victoria in Balmoral in September 1856. Then she went to Malvern for her health, to be looked after. And she didn't get back to London until October, November 1856. And then we know that the portrait was finished, the painting was finished in June 1857. So the photo must have been taken between November 1856 and June 57, actually before June, because the painting was finished in June. So the painter most probably used that photograph. You can see that the dress is exactly the same, and you can also see that Mr. Scharf did not draw Miss Nightingale from life. He actually reproduced the painting, sort of. He modified a few things, but it's very clear that his drawing is after the photograph. So this is a heavily retouched version of this photograph, which became an icon, and which you can see here in my mug. So it's really an icon. And this is the full photograph. So this is what Mr. Barrett actually showed. So he had this photograph of Florence Nightingale made, and he used it to draw a correct portrait of her. Actually, two photographs were made that day. And this is the other one. This one is not as well known, and it shows a very, very unusual Florence. She's standing in profile, and she's not wearing a cap on for the first time. And you can see she has very short hair, which was very unusual at the time. But if you read Queen Victoria's journals, Victoria mentions meeting Florence Nightingale in September 1856. She was very impatient to meet that wonderful woman, and this is what she writes. Miss Nightingale came dressed in black, etc., with a little cap, her hair having been cut actually on account of the insects, she calls them insects, with which the poor soldiers were covered in the hospital. So, yes, insects, lice, we would call them lice now. So she had to cut her hair and cut it very short. So this was September. She had been back for over a month, and so her hair was getting a bit longer. So it must have been very short when she came back. And it's quite strange that she accepted to sit for the photographer without a cap on, but probably because the painter wanted to have the face, full front, and the profile as well to help. So what happened? She didn't want to sit for him, but at some point she relented, maybe she was sorry, and she accepted to sit for a photograph, not to sit for the painter, but to sit for a photograph, because it was shorter. It just took her about maybe a quarter of an hour, half an hour to sit for two portraits, and then Mr. Barrett was happy, everybody was happy, and the painting was finished. Now, these are two other iconic photos of Florence Nightingale sitting in the same armchair. So these photos were taken probably at the same time. I know some people disagree with that, and they say that the photos were taken before she left for the Crimea, but I've got some doubts because she was totally unknown then, and nobody probably wanted her photos. These are cartes de visite, and this is important because cartes de visite did not become popular until after she came back from the Crimea. So this one on the right is in the Royal Collection Trust, and it is very important because we know that it was stuck in an album by Prince Albert. Now, Prince Albert died in December 1861, so we know that the photo must have been bought or acquired or made before that date. So it gives us a sort of a range of dates between 1856 or 57 and 1861. Carte de visite, I said, was not very popular, well, actually non-existent in 1856, 57, even though it had been patented in 1854 by Disdéry, André-Eugène Adolphe Disdéry, a French photographer, who you can see a caricature of him on the right here. So he patented the carte de visite. He was not the inventor. Somebody had invented the carte de visite, well, mentioned the idea before him, but he took the patent, and he actually sat on it for 5 years. And the carte de visite became popular in 1859 in France. Emperor Napoleon III and his family, his wife, the Empress Eugénie, and his son, Loulou, went to see Disdéry the day before the emperor left for Italy in May 1859. And it was a very clever move on the part of the emperor, because he knew he was going to be away from France, but his photograph was going to be in every shop window, everywhere in the capital, everywhere in France. So he was absent, but he was also present. Napoleon III was a very cunning person, and he understood very early the importance of photography and how photography could help you get into your subjects' parlors and be closer to your subject, actually. So he used photography to be there while he was physically absent. In Britain, carte de visite didn't become popular until 1860, when Queen Victoria allowed John Jabez Edwin Mayall to publish, for the public to mass produce photos of herself, her husband, and her children, the Royal Family Album. So it was published in 1860. So carte de visite did not take off until 1860, 59 in France, 1860 in Britain. So the photos of Florence Nightingale as carte de visite were not made before that. So 1861, we know Prince Albert dies, but he already had a photo of Florence Nightingale in one of the last album he actually collected. Now, this is another interesting thing. This is an article published on Friday the 15th of March 1861, and this is the first mention I could find of the carte de visite of Florence Nightingale being sold to the public. So James Robinson of Grafton Street, Dublin, announces that he has a large collection of cartes de visite, including the Queen, the Archbishop of Dublin, and Miss Florence Nightingale, etc., etc. So March 1861, Prince Albert was still alive. So this is when the photo actually was published for the public. People could actually buy this image of Florence Nightingale sitting. This is another one from August 1861. Again, portraits of eminent persons. So you've got a long list. Palmerston, and of course, again, Miss Nightingale. So this is when her photo appeared. And we know it is the photo where she's sitting, one of the photos where she's sitting, because this engraving on the right was published in a German illustrated magazine, Über Land und Meer, sorry about the German accent, in 1862, March 1862. So we know this was made from the photo on the left here, and so this makes sense that the first photograph was published around 1861. Upwards of 500 photographic portraits of the most celebrated personages of the age. With a hand magnifying glass, every portrait would be seen perfect, and it actually is. So it is a carte de visite. It's 10 centimeters high, very small image, but very cheap to buy. It was the cheapest photo format at the time, and people went crazy about them, and Cartomania was launched, and people wanted to collect as many portraits of celebrities as they could, and here they had 500 of them. Now, we don't really know who made that photo, because I've seen it with several backs, one from Polton, one from Disdairy, other blank backs, so we don't really know who made that photo. What we know is that, of course, they had to cut out all the portraits, stick them on a piece of paper, and re-photograph the whole thing. There was no Photoshop at the time, so they had to do it manually, and it must have been quite a job, a time-consuming job. So we know that. So as you can see, we have a match here. Curtain. Well, you can say, okay, well, the curtain doesn't prove anything. These were curtains that could be bought anywhere. Okay, so let's carry on. Now, this is another photo by the same photographer here. You see that the background is the same. Oh, and we find the curtain again, by the way. So the background and the curtain. So now we've got two things. And this is a photo by the same photographer. Oh, and now we've got the carpet too. So curtains, background, carpet, 3 elements. So the photo of Florence Nightingale was taken by this man here, who took the stereos, the half stereos I've just shown you. And here is another one here showing another part of the carpet here. So definitely there is a match here, and we know now who the photographer is. And he photographed a statuette showing Florence Nightingale and the wounded soldier, and he put his name on the statuette, and his name is Goodman of London. Claudius Erskine Goodman, C.E. Goodman, is the photographer who took the image of Florence Nightingale just when she got back from the Crimea. Now, what about the London Stereoscopic Company? This is a copyright slip from the National Archives at Kew, dated 1862, and you can see the name of the managing director of the London Stereoscopic Company, George Swan Nottage, who later on became mayor of London and died in office. So, this is an enlargement. Florence Nightingale by Steele, 2nd day of December 1862. So the first people to copyright photos of Florence Nightingale were actually the London Stereoscopic Company. But they didn't copyright a stereo over, they copyrighted a carte de visite of a bust of Florence Nightingale by Steele. So this is this bust was exhibited at the International Exhibition in 1862, and the London Stereoscopic and Photographic Company copyrighted the photo of the bust. They were the only persons allowed to take photos. They bought for a very high price the right to take photos of the exhibition and the exhibits. So they were the first to copyright a photo showing something related to Florence Nightingale. This is the bust, by the way. This is the bust as you can see it at the Florence Nightingale Museum. So they made copies of it in metal. And this one is at the National Portrait Gallery. So there are a few copies of that bust, and there is I think the original is at the National Army Museum, actually, the original bust, the marble bust. So, another example of the involvement of the London Stereoscopic Company in 1897, so 40 years after, 41 years after Florence came back from the Crimea. And you can see, well, you can't see much of the photo because of the reflection. It was warped, and I couldn't make it flat, so I just photographed it like this. London Stereoscopic Company, proprietor of copyright, author of work Henry Lenthal, and this is from 1897. Now, Henry Lenthal, that's an interesting name. He was on the list we saw earlier. And this is another copyright slip bearing the name of Henry Lenthal, and this one is from 1866. Henry Lenthal's 222 Regent Street, London. And as you can see, it is a vignette showing parts of Florence Nightingale, just the bust. We saw that dress somewhere else before. So Henry Lenthal is actually the successor of another photographer whose name was William Edward Kilburn. He succeeded Kilburn in about 1862. He was probably his assistant before, but he succeeded Kilburn in 1862. And it's the only photograph of Florence Nightingale he copyrighted. The one the London Stereoscopic Company copyrighted with his name was actually, the copyright was made about, I think the first one was made a week or two before Lenthal died, and the second one was made after he had died. So they bought the rights to the photo when just before he died. And this one is the only picture of Nightingale, Lenthal copyrighted. So this brings us to now Mr. Kilburn. Mr. Kilburn was a photographer. He had been a photographer since around the end of 1846, and he became one of the first photographers of the royal family of England in 1847. And here is a photo of the Earl of Beaconsfield, better known as Benjamin Disraeli. And as you can see, it's Mr. Kilburn and Lenthal's successor. Now look at Mr. Disraeli, but look at the armchair on the left, because this is the armchair Miss Nightingale is sitting on in the photos that were sold in 1861. Can I do that? Yeah, I can do that again. So it is the same armchair. Okay, and these photos were sold with Mr. Kilburn's name on the back as well in 1861, before Lenthal succeeded him. Now, this is a photo of the Archbishop of Canterbury on the left, and the photo we saw earlier of Miss Nightingale on the right. Now, this prop on the left of the Archbishop is a bookcase, but it's not a real bookcase. It's probably made of papier-mâché, just looking like real wood, but very light to carry. And the books inside are not real books. You can see actually there is not much depth. And it is the same base. The base is exactly the same. You can't see very much here, but there is a better image. On the left is a daguerreotype, a tinted daguerreotype by Mr. Kilburn with the same base, only the base of the bookcase, and you can see that the patterns are exactly the same. So same armchair, same base, bookcase base. Again, we have a match. And the name of Kilburn is the first one that appears on those photos of Miss Nightingale. Now, why Kilburn? Well, the answer could be Jenny Lind. Jenny Lind, who knew Florence Nightingale, who actually gave a concert to raise money for one of Miss Nightingale's hospitals, had been photographed by Mr. Kilburn. He made a nice daguerreotype, which was later sold as a card de visite. Here it is. And he took other photos of her, so two more photos by Kilburn of the singer, the Swedish Nightingale, Jenny Lind. So Miss Nightingale, Miss Lind, who knew Miss Nightingale, could have recommended Kilburn as a photographer, because he was not a show-off at all. He was a very shy, reserved person, and he was a very discreet one. The Queen could also have recommended Mr. Kilburn, because he was one of the, as I said before, one of the first photographers, official photographers of the royal family. He started taking photos of the royal family in 1847. So you have here in the middle a nice portrait of the Queen with one of her daughters. On the left, Prince Albert, a nicely tinted daguerreotype. And on the right, again, a portrait of the Queen with the children. She didn't like her face, so she actually put a thumb on the photo and sort of erased the face. But she says in her journals that the likenesses of her children were very nice. So the Queen could have recommended Kilburn to Miss Nightingale, or Miss Lind, we don't know. Why Goodman? Why Goodman? Why choose Goodman as a photographer? Well, Goodman, strangely enough, didn't study to be a photographer. He was a surgeon. He was actually a surgeon. He was a member of the Royal College of Surgeons. And he took up photography among many other things. He was once in partnership with people selling seeds and flowers and gas as well. He was in gas factory, gas manufacturer. So he was a surgeon, and so he knew about being secretive, about not telling people about his patients, or maybe here his models. And there might be another reason as well. This is the sort of report for the third ordinary meeting of the Photographic Society, which was created in January 1853. And they had their third ordinary meeting on the 7th of April 1853, and they elected new members. And that day, there were two new members, John Bonham Carter, who was an MP, and who was Florence Nightingale's cousin, the brother of Hilary Bonham Carter, who had made some drawings of her, and, as you can see, Claudius Erskine Goodman, Esquire. So the two men knew each other. They probably met at the Photographic Society, and so maybe John Bonham Carter introduced Florence Nightingale to Mr. Goodman. There is another reason maybe why she chose those two men. So you can see here a map of London, Regent Street, between Miss Nightingale and the photographer on the right. And so this is where the location of their studios were. Mr. Goodman, 180 New Bond Street, Mr. Kilburn, 222 Regent Street, and Miss Nightingale, 30 Old Burlington Street. So she was quite close. So she could easily walk to their studio or ask them to walk to her place. So we know that she probably walked to Mr. Goodman's studio, but I think that Mr. Kilburn actually came to her place because the backdrop he uses in her photograph, I have never seen anywhere else. It's not the normal background of the studio. So he may have carried with him this very light base, papier-mâché base for the bookcase and his photographic equipment, and came to see her at 30 Old Burlington Street. But this is all conjecture. We have no proof. We have nothing from these two men mentioning taking photos of Florence Nightingale. And this is to their credit. They actually never said anything about taking photos. Kilburn sold photos of Nightingale in 1861, and then his successor did as well. Goodman never sold photos with his name on them. So we have eliminated everybody, so we know now who took those photos. We still don't know about the one on the left, the one taken in 1852, but the other photos are accounted for, Goodman and Kilburn, all of them. So, Claudius Erskine Goodman, as I said, was a surgeon and a photographer, among other things. He died in 1873. Kilburn was a photographer for between 1846 and about 1862 as well. He stopped soon after the carte de visite was introduced, and they never copyrighted their images. Copyright in Britain became compulsory in August 1862, but some people copyrighted photos which they thought would be very popular, and they didn't want anybody to copy them. But Goodman and Kilburn never copyrighted any of those images, which is very, very mysterious, actually, quite interesting. So the photos were probably not meant to be published at the time. They were meant to be shown to Mr. Barrett and maybe a couple of friends, and something leaked and they got published later on. There are other photos of Florence Nightingale, much later photos, but they never really became iconic. This is from the one on the left is from 1893, and the other two are a bit later with her sister, the bottom one, with a sister and a brother-in-law, Harry Verney, and top one with the nurses. There is a variant of that one where she's sitting inside, actually, and you can only see her face through the window. But these photos never became iconic. The other ones had a very, very long shelf life. 1872, somebody, Timothy Cole, I think, engraved this from Goodman's photograph, and this is on the right a cigarette card from 1935 using the drawing by Scharf after Goodman's photograph. This is the photo by Kilburn, the most famous one of them, 1897. Now, 1897, 40 years after Florence Nightingale, well, over 40 years after she came back from the Crimea, they were still using that photo. She was still alive, and this is the photo they used when she was awarded the Order of Merit. She was the first woman to be awarded the Order of Merit, and this is the photo they used in 1897. The other two on the right, 1910. The middle one is from the French obituary when she died, and the other one, as you can see, is in German. So also an obituary in August 1910 after she died. So the photo, this is the photo people remember, or those two photos people remember, and these are the iconic images of Florence Nightingale. Now, Florence Nightingale didn't help either, because all through her life she said that she was only photographed once, and that was because the Queen requested it. So she created that legend. She was photographed once by command of the Queen. Now, we've seen several photos of Florence Nightingale, so we know she didn't sit only once, she sat several times. So this letter is from 1866, somebody asking for a photograph, and she says, sorry, I haven't got a photograph, I only sat once, and that was by request of the Queen. There is another letter, this one from 1868, yeah. I would send you a photograph if I had one, as you desired. But I have not. I never had one done except once by command. So we are 12 years after she got back from the Crimea, and she still says she only sat for a photographer once by command of the Queen. And this is an account published in the Journal of Nursing in 1911. Elizabeth Robinson Scoville went to visit Florence Nightingale, and she had just bought a photograph published by the London Stereoscopic Company. We saw the photograph, the one that they used for the Order of Merit. The Stereoscopic Company had copyrighted it in 1897, and she bought a photo, and she wanted Miss Nightingale to sign it. And Miss Nightingale in 1897 said, I always hated having my photograph taken. This one was done by command of the Queen when I returned from the Crimea. It was the one that's been reproduced, showing her in a black lace cap with rosettes over. So this is the photo used in the 1897 Order of Merit document I just showed before. And again, she says the same thing. So why did she lie? Why did Florence lie? Well, there is a very simple reason. She shied publicity. She didn't want people to have a photograph. She didn't want people to worship her. She wanted to be remembered for what she had done, not for what she looked like. And it was a very, very nice excuse. She found a great excuse. Sorry, I was only photographed once by order of the Queen, meaning if you're not the Queen, you won't have my portrait. So it was a very nice excuse, and I think, I'm not sure of course, but I think that in the end, she actually believed it, and she believed what she was saying. Although we know that there were several portraits being sold around, but it was a nice excuse, and people left her alone. She said it nicely, and then she wasn't bothered anymore. So I think that's what happened. So let's go back to that image from the Royal Collection. This is the description on the website of the Royal Collection. She maintained that the photo was taken by order of the Queen. Now, if the Queen of England commands you to have your photo taken, chances are that she will get a copy of the photo she asked for, or several copies maybe. Now, there are only 2 photos of Florence Nightingale in the Royal Collections out of 500,000 photos. And this one, as you can see, was acquired by Prince Albert. He had to pay for it. Now, if the photo had been commanded by the Queen, honestly, do you think he would have had to buy it? And what about the other one? Acquired in 2015. So the other Kilburn photo was not given to the Queen either, and there is no photo by Goodman in the Royal Collection. So it was not done by royal command. It was the first photos, as I said, was done because family probably convinced her that it would be nice to help Mr. Barrett finish his painting, and she relented. And the other photos, maybe because again, the family wanted some memento, and there was a desire from the public, of course, to know what she looked like. But the photos were not published immediately. The photographers waited for a few years before the images were reproduced. So, Mr. Kilburn actually didn't take one image of Florence Nightingale, he took 4, and I've got here 3 different. So if you look at the face, there are 3 different photos. Well, actually, there are 4 different ones. And the funny thing is, she moved her head a little. And we are the London Stereoscopic Company, and every time we look at photos, especially 2 photos which look a bit similar, we are always trying to see, oh, maybe this is a 3D image of Florence Nightingale. And you know what? It actually is. If you look at the bottom pictures and you squint, you have to squint. I chose that format because it's easier. You may see Florence Nightingale for the first time in 3D. And for those who don't want to squint or who can't squint, I hope this works. This is, if you look at it, after a while, it becomes a sort of 3D portrait, a 3D image. The expression changed a little, but it's good enough to make a 3D. So we actually have a sort of 3D portraits of Miss Nightingale, and from 2 of her iconic images. I hope you can see that. You will let me know afterwards. And if you go to London, you can follow some footsteps of Nightingale, and there are lots of places where you can remember Florence Nightingale. This is Waterloo Place with a memorial to the Crimean War, and there is a statue of Sidney Herbert here, and next to him stands Florence Nightingale with a genie lamp again, but still it's her. And this is another angle. And the statue was appeared just before the First World War. You see here a tinted glass slide made during the war, the First World War. And this is in 1954 when they laid a wreath at the base of the statue to commemorate the centenary of her leaving for the Crimea. And of course, if you go to London, you must go to the Florence Nightingale Museum. I think they are reopening with social distancing and masks and everything to keep you safe. And this is where you can actually meet the lady. You can see objects belonging to her. This is one of her collars, and this is a detail of a dress. They have a dress belonging to Florence Nightingale, so a few details. Very severe, very sober dress, but still very nice and quite moving to actually look at her and imagine. You can see how tall she was and how slim she was in that dress. This is a medicine kit as well. So if you want to discover the real Florence Nightingale, you have photos of her, a few photos of her. Now you know a little more, I hope, about them, and you can go to the Florence Nightingale Museum, and this talk was given to help them recover from all those months during which they had to close because of the pandemic. So that's it, I guess. So thank you very much for your attention. If you have questions, please use the chat to ask your questions, unless I can, unless I actually allow you to talk now, which I could do maybe. I'll stop sharing my screen, and if you have any questions, please do so. And okay, so if anyone wants to ask a question, maybe can you do you have something to raise your hand here? Maybe can I unmute everybody? Maybe you can unmute everybody. Try to do that. Sorry, I'm new to that thing, so participants. Okay, I can allow you to unmute yourself. So if you have a question, unmute yourself and ask a question, please. It will be a pleasure to answer if I can. And cheers, by the way. Anyone?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Does the museum have a list of the various schools of nursing that Florence Nightingale was involved in setting up around the country or around the world?
I'm sure they must have some information about that. Yes, of course. Yeah. I'm not from the museum, so but I'm sure if they don't, they will provide. They will find a way to provide you one. Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Oh yes, just contact them, and
I will do that.
they will be
Thank you
pleased
very much.
to answer your question. Thank you, Ruthie. Any more questions? Either I've been very boring or very clear, so maybe you are dying to have a drink.
It was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, okay, so we call it a day then. So don't forget to visit the Florence Nightingale Museum, and maybe we'll have some more talks about other things. And if you find the answers to the 3 mysteries I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, please let me know. I'd like to know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi everyone. So I can see you now. I can see you now. Yeah, I can see.
Thank you.
Okay, let's have. Hi Christopher and Gerlin and Rachel and Katia. Yeah, okay. I can't see everybody because there are several screens, but yeah, okay. Good. Okay. Well, shall we call it a day then, and let you get back to whatever you were doing before? Hi, Paul.
I've got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How long did you spend doing this research? Because you've done an extraordinary amount of research. I'm wondering what's your time frame?
Well, research is what I like most, actually. I'm not a specialist of Florence Nightingale, but I was intrigued by the fact that nobody knew anything about those photos. I mean, the people knew things, but there was so many contradictions, and I like a mystery, and so it was great fun actually going to all those places, looking at all the photos, all the documents, and trying to make sense of them. And the strangest part was how secretive Florence Nightingale herself had been. She didn't want to be photographed. She really didn't want to. So they probably had to drag her with horses or whatever to Mr. Goodman. And you can see in the photos, at least the Goodman photos, she's not really smiling. She doesn't look very happy. In one or two of the Kelburn photos, you can actually see a smile, the beginning of a smile, sort of Mona Lisa smile. That was really amazing. And what struck me most was that everybody knows those images. I'm French. I mean, I'm not even British, and I know those images. I've known them all my life. And if it had been a painting, people would have known everything about it. But photographs, for some strange reason, people don't care. Who took the photo? I don't care. And I find that so surprising. So it took some time, yes. But it was fascinating to learn about Florence and to go and see the carriage at Clayton House. And during that quest, we met lots of wonderful people, and I spent a fortune buying some documents because I like to have original documents to work from. And you have nice reproductions now online, of course, but it's so much better to work with original documents. I mean, there is something, you are so much closer to the person when you can see an actual photo that was sold while the person was alive. So yeah, it took a while. It took a while, and to put everything, to piece everything together, and to change it from 3D into 2D, because originally it was 3D, but I knew that most people wouldn't have the equipment, so it was pointless to do it. And a lot of documents are flats anyway, so I had to cheat a little to make it look 3D, but hey, it worked.
It would be fascinating to see if those reproduced together on a card with a stereoscope. So
yes, so maybe we'll do that at some point. Yes, yeah, because we can do that. We can do the card and make sure that it's reproduced and visible with a stereoscopic viewer. One of those, for example.
At the museum, I've been to that museum is very good.
Yeah, well, I could have tried anaglyphs, but yeah, what I'll do is I will send a file to the Florence Nightingale Museum so that they can have a picture somewhere and people can actually look at Florence in 3D for the first time. Nobody knew there was a 3D photo of Florence Nightingale. I didn't either. It was just because I put all the photos together. I tried every photo I could find, every sample I could find. I tried to put two and two because I was hoping the Goodman one would be in stereo, the one with the curtains in the back. Because Goodman was taking stereos at the time, but no, he took probably a bigger camera and he made just a mono portrait. Unfortunately for us.
So
But
were you
maybe
familiar with any of those photographers when you started to research, or did you just?
yes, I was familiar with Kilburn and Goodman, yeah. And so I found about the other ones, and the process of elimination was quite fun actually. Especially, I mean, and it's very funny because this one about Charles Goethe, nobody checked when he was born. I mean, you can't take a photo like that when you're 5, especially in those days using the collodion process. He must have been a very, very precocious photographer. So it's impossible. This is still a mystery. If somebody finds information about this image of Florence Nightingale in 1852, even though it's not iconic, that would be fabulous. So there are still things to find out. If we could find, a diary by Mr. Goodman or one by Mr. Kilburn, that would be fabulous. Today, Florence Nightingale sat for me. That would be fabulous. So maybe one day. So it's still a quest, ongoing quest. Yes, Paul, you have a question. Thank you.
Is there any link or any mention anywhere with Roger Fenton in the Crimea, Florence Nightingale?
No, I checked that, of course. Yeah, that's one of the things I checked because Florence was in the Crimea nearly at the same time I spent it, but she didn't actually stay long in the Crimea, and she was very sick when she was there, and he was busy somewhere else as well. So I'm not sure they ever met. There is no mention whatsoever. I couldn't find anything. It would have been fabulous to find a photo of Florence Nightingale live, of course, because he photographed so many people there, but apparently there's nothing.
That would be one of the holy grails.
It would, yeah.
You could find one of those.
I'm sure you'll find it before me, Paul. You'll find it before me. I trust you. That's your quest.
Okay.
Any more questions, anyone? I'm sorry, I can't see everybody, so I should switch to the other screen. Okay, so Florence. Okay, well, shall we call it today then? And
Thanks very much, Denis.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it.
All of you. Thank you. And well, have a nice evening, morning, night. I know it's 1 o'clock in the morning in Japan, maybe 2 now, 2:30, so it's very early. So Momoko must be in there now. So bye-bye, everyone. And
Denis.
maybe another time. Cheers.